Hi, good morning also from my side. So indeed, I'm with the OSCE representative on freedom of the media, which is embedded in a security organization, which is a little bit the umbrella of my talk here today. But I'm really trying to align the theme of today's general overarching theme on AI's humanity's future to the themes of information integrity, well-informed, active citizenry, and a pluralistic, democratic, peaceful society. In doing so, I think I can really build on many things we've heard in the talk before, but also earlier today, and there's a link to many things we discussed already. When we look at AI and information, the first reaction very often are things that we also heard already today, is disinformation, the amplification of such disinformation in the digital realm, but also the creation and generation of deep fakes, really things that manipulate our information landscape and therefore our ability to form opinions independently and make democratic decisions. When I think about a world that is driven by AI from the information perspective, I really see two possible dystopian scenarios. The one is a world where indeed all the information we are able to receive is manipulated, where information is easily weaponized, instrumentalized, really in an attempt to discriminate, manipulate, or control people. This would be a world where individuals are not able to participate publicly or politically. The other scenario on the other side kind of is a world where the mere possibility of information being manipulated or generated by AI leads to such a level of distrust and fear and doubt that individuals and people are not willing to participate publicly or politically. And both of these scenarios are really not compatible with democracy. They're both drifting us further apart, and they're both a scenario where we cannot have a shared reality, which is the baseline of any democratic society. So I want to, starting from this a little bit negative outlook, make 3 points in this talk today on a kind of journey towards a future where hopefully AI will be aligned with humanity and human rights. The first point is kind of starting from where we are today. If we look at how society interacts with information today, already we see that AI is really at the center of the decisions that are being made. We see that information, or I'm just maybe as an outsider, I also want to say why I focus on information, is really because information is the baseline of any decision we are able today to take on the private, political, but also professional level. So access to information, but access to accurate, diverse public interest information is really essential for us as individuals and society to live, to make decisions, and to live in a peaceful, pluralistic conversation, democracy and society. It's also, of course, relevant when we look at security, particularly with all the crises unfolding in the world today, but also when we think about, for example, elections. I know that here in Serbia there will be elections very soon, but also in the coming 12 to 14 months, I think more than 60 countries on a global scale head to the polls. So it is really a question, a key question, whether we have access to information or not as individuals and as society. So going back to the question of how we interact with information today, we see that especially in the digital ecosystem and more people are gaining there or accessing information digitally, they are really, we see a kind of monopolization. We see a few online platforms that have really become gatekeepers to our information. They decide what is being possible online, what is permissible, what is visible, and they execute these decisions with AI, with algorithms, and with automated systems. So the AI is currently being used to really shape and arbitrate our public and political discourse. So this is really a key democratic question that we are looking at today. We heard already earlier today about possibilities of these systems to lead to discrimination, to information bubbles, to manipulation. I'm not going to go into this because I'm sure you're all very well aware of these challenges, but it really boils back to something that we heard earlier about targeted advertising, so really having the systems, the design, development, and deployment of these AI tools lean towards maximizing engagement by users, by individuals, so that you can show more advertising, gain more data, collect more data, and therefore show more advertising to the individuals. So, and as long as this is the prioritization, we have to, of course, be aware of what drives engagement, and there is plenty of evidence that disinformation, sensational, emotional content, polarizing content is that drives people more. So these content pieces and items are being prioritized, which of course is at odds very often with accuracy, diversity, and public interest, which is so in need for any democratic society. And I would say this is a general challenge that we heard the talk before about this aim of profit and this short-term profit, but this is really a crucial issue if profit comes at the expense of human rights, of democratic values. And this, I think, is also an important lesson that we learned from the kind of like internet and social media ecosystem in the last years. And therefore, it is my second point to really say, if we want to make sure that AI is being aligned with human rights and that we have human rights-centric AI, that means that we have to ensure it early on through regulatory means. In the early days of the internet, we kind of missed this opportunity. To a certain degree, it was also intentional that we want to have a decentralized system. But it led to a scenario that we are in now, where you can really see a few private actors having this immense power. So we learned, sometimes very painfully, that unchecked power, and especially undue power in combination with unchecked power, is a very dangerous mix. And this is the lesson we have to learn with regard to AI and emerging technologies as well. We have seen that there's a lack of transparency, accountability, democratic oversight, and all of these issues and problems pertain to the online sphere when we speak about platforms, social media companies, and all of these things. But when we look at AI, I think we're really at a crossroads still to say, how can we make sure that we are not, or that we are learning from the lessons, from the historical lessons, to make sure that we are building a framework early on that really makes sure it is founded and rooted in strong democratic values and human rights. This, I think, is also something we heard before about the firing of ethical staff and ethical board and all of these issues, which is another important lesson, I think, in this conversation, that self-regulation is, in fact, not enough. This is something that we learned very painfully in the context of online platforms, and is, again, a lesson we should be taking from this development to see, okay, when we speak about AI, there is a need for regulation that is really linked to enforcement, to sanctions, and to kind of like the hard law in this sense. I also want to link this really back to information, the need for public interest and quality information, because in the very complex world we are living in, it makes it even more important to outline the need for intermediaries to explain the world to us, to be something that we can rely to, a voice of reference in that sense. That, of course, is the democratic role of the media. Not saying that the media is a perfect system, neither here nor anywhere else, but we have developed systems for ethical standards, for professional standards in the media context, to verify information, to correct errors if something goes wrong, and to have a system of self-regulatory accountability, all of which does not exist in the online sphere, where we have seen that, so to say, trivial user-generated content is really dealt with the same as high-quality public interest information that should be provided by independent media, but also by public institutions, democratic institutions, and the states. So that we have to make sure that with AI we don't have the same kind of like leaning towards commercial, or like prioritizing commercial means over public interest means. So we have to change the incentives to make sure that accuracy, diversity, and public interest is being prioritized over short-term profit that come through advertising, and very often at the expense of individuals. This means we have to reassess the excessive power that big tech currently have over the democratic conversation and public discourse. Another point that I want to make here is for calling for these frameworks on a human rights-based manner being built early on, is that otherwise we're currently trying to just react to problems that are popping up, so to speak. So we are trying to fix things that broke in this mantra of moving fast and breaking things, but that means that this affects human rights, and particularly, first and foremost, very often those of already marginalized and already discriminated people, which are even more affected by a lack of regulation and accountability. This, I think, also links back to, I think, even though we heard so many limitations of the technologies already this morning about biases, about problematic hallucinations and all of these issues, but I think it's also fair to say that, of course, the inventions or like developments, technological developments are, of course, also very fascinating. I mean, I think we are all to a certain degree impressed by things that even ChatGPT and other things are able to do. They can be very useful in different things, but it's just important to always remember that innovation shouldn't come at all costs, and it's not innovation for the sake of innovation, and it should certainly not come as a race to the bottom, which we see very often if, again, profit and money and advertising and these kind of values are being prioritized. This brings me to my very last and third point, that I think we also have to shift the conversation from these challenges and the problem we have been discussing. We heard throughout the morning, and we will continue to discuss, and it's important to continue to discuss it, but we also have to shift this conversation to a question and conversation about how can we build technology that is in fact conducive to human rights. What kind of technology and AI tools do we want to build and develop that really boosts democracy, democratic values that can help us as individuals and society, and therefore also humanity, which is the overarching theme of today. I think that one of the important steps in this regard is like to build regulatory means and policies really based on these human rights and democratic values, so that then these institutions can make the decisions about technology before they are being deployed, while they are being developed, so that in fact we as society do not accommodate technology, but rather technology accommodates us as society, as democracies. And this, of course, needs to be linked to technology that works without surveillance, without manipulation, but in a system of strong checks and balances. Lastly, the very last point is I think that this needs to be part of a broader call for healthy information ecosystems. But of course, this is again circling back to the very first dystopian scenarios that I outlined of a world where information and content is not believed anymore or not believable because it is indeed being manipulated. That of course we have to work through an information ecosystem that is built on accuracy, on pluralism, on public interest in the end. And I think that we can do that by moving also from the conversation about risk-based to rights-based, and really start with the human and end with the human. I think this was also something we already heard this morning. And while we are working on this, building more responsible and human rights-centric AI, until we are at this point, we really have to focus on human rights-based and responsible use of AI. Thanks.
Thank you, Julia. Do we have any questions in the audience for Julia? Yeah, Mikhail. Where? Sorry, I missed it.
Well, just because you asked a question already, maybe we should take somebody else, but I'm also happy to.
Thanks for the talk, really interesting. How would you respond to the proposal that, in fact, what a lot of these AI developments are doing is exposing weaknesses in existing systems? And do you think there's a possible danger that in the process of dealing with the impact of AI on, for example, democratic processes, we take resources away from actually dealing with the fundamental weaknesses in those democratic processes?
Yes, absolutely. Very good question. I think, maybe just 2 points here. First of all, something that is relevant, I think, in this conversation is that, of course, AI or technological tools can also be used to help overcoming, for example, human biases or pointing out lacks of historical discriminatory practices and all of these things. There are a lot of also already cool examples, for example, to synthesize also specific data of underrepresented groups in data sets that are then used to train AI tools and so on and so forth. So there is, of course, a big part also of where AI or technology can be used to help to become more democratic, more pluralistic and fairer as a society. But I think, and this points to the second issue that I want to raise, really the fundamental thing about transparency, being open about what is being done, and being also multi-stakeholder in the approach, inclusive, listen to those who are affected, taking them to the table and have an open, transparent, apologies, and then also accountable conversation so that we can really, as a society, make the decision of where do we even want to have technology applied, where do we want to have tech solutions, and to also recognize that societal challenges cannot be solved with technology alone.